Welcome to Built to Win, the podcast created to help you level up your business game by developing a success mindset made for the long run. In this episode, the Neora leadership team sits down to discuss how ethics affect your long-term business strategy. Join us as founder Jeff Olson, co-founder and president Amber Olson Rourke, co-CEO Deborah Heisz, and executive VP of Business Development Dave Fleming look at what it means to have ethics, how it changes the way you approach your business, and how it affects the way others perceive your brand.
Hello, welcome everybody to the next episode of the Built to Win podcast. We've got the whole group today. We've got our CEO and founder of Neora, Jeff Olson, with us. Co-founder and president of Neora, Amber Olson Rourke, is with us, and co-CEO of Neora, Deb Heisz, is with us. And of course, I'm Dave Fleming. I'm the EVP of Business Development for Neora. Today, we're talking about ethics in business, and one of the big, heavy questions is: can you be successful and still be ethical in business? Is ethics in business important, and how do we know? How do you know it's important?
Yes, Dave, it's great to be here. And you know, one thing we learn in life is that the way you live your life is also the way you run your business, and they interact with each other. And quite honestly, a business is nothing more than a group of people who come together with a common goal. But it's not just a common goal, it's common principles, it's common values, it's common ethics, okay? When you bring those things together, then you get the synergy of that group coming together. So think about it, when a group of people come together ethically, then you have a much more powerful group. And so I think it's a very important part of business. I don't necessarily think all companies that are successful are ethical, but I think the great companies, the ones that withstand the test of time, the ones that are talking about years later or decades later, are the ethical ones. And ethics is really an individual thing. It's something that's learned. I know I got my ethics from my mom. I really don't know a more ethical person than my mom. I'm sure there are others out there, but it's something that is individualized. We all have a different outlook on it, and it's something that is learned, but it's something that is very important. It's really the values that you have. It's the principles that you stand for, and it has a certain spiritual element to it. I'm sure we'll go down into that, but it's really a decision how you're going to make decisions and how you're going to do things. I'll give you a good example. Before we launched Neora, which I think is an incredibly ethical company, which attracts incredibly ethical people at all levels, I don't think that was by mistake. Because before the company even opened its doors, it had 10 core values. 10 core values that were really thought out, printed out, and became part of every single part of communications and the fabric of the company. And these are core values. We're kind of like the ethics of the company. Okay, this is what we're going to live by. Okay, and so everybody has that part to them. And so what you'll find in life, time will either promote you or it will expose you. Okay, and I think one of the big things in life that will expose you are your ethics. Okay, you can have success on a foundation of not strong ethics, but it's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It eventually will erode. Okay. But if you have ethics, you can withstand the test, because there will be tests that come your way. There will be those. And it's the ethics, it's the principles, it's the values, which really create your integrity, which really creates your character, which creates your meaning. It's the foundation of that. That's what you can get you through things. And so, I've always said you want to have perfect intentions, but nobody has perfect execution of their intentions, but they have perfect intentions. And you want to have, perfect ethics, but guess what? You don't always get great ethical responses to being ethical. And that's one of the things that really where you find out who you are, because quite honestly, the world is made up of it's very simple. There's evil and there's good. Okay. It's been here since the beginning of time. And that struggle will always be there. And those influences will always be there. Okay. And you can make a decision to do the ethical things, which I think are the way to live your life and to build a solid foundation. But you don't always get ethical responses. And this is when you kind of find out who you are. For me, it is a core thing. And that's why we had our 10 core values. And I would suggest anybody out there, you've been an old company, but why don't you sit down with your management team and say, what are our core values? Look up our core values to give yourself an idea what I mean by that. They're right there on our website. And it's really just like the principles. It's really like the philosophy. We decided how we're going to run the company. And it's based on ethics. It's based on doing things the ethical way. And so I think that's one of the most fundamental, important things that people need to think about. It's an underlying energy in a company that will guide you through the thick and thin, the ups and downs, the good and the bads. Okay, so I'm very excited about this.
Let's talk about the hard reality of ethics. I know that we've all had experiences, we've all been through things on both sides where we've experienced people behaving ethically and unethically. But Amber, you grew up around Jeff. You started the Neora business with your dad. What's been the value of doing that in an ethical way? I know that's really important, as Jeff mentioned, part of the 10 core values. But what did you see in like how that played out in reality?
Yeah, there's this term that I really like, which is called conscious capitalism. And what I like about that term is that as a leader of a company, it is your job to be able to make sure that the company is profitable, sustainable, right? That's kind of the capitalism side of it. But more importantly, is to do it in a conscious way that is really providing value to your employees, providing value into the market. And so it shouldn't be a philosophy where you see this, in probably some of the companies that you can think of right now that you personally have a distrust for, is because they have a profit over everything mentality. And it should not be that profit is over everything. We have made so many decisions along the way that lowered the profit we were going to maybe make in that situation. But we made that decision because the decision was in alignment with what our core values were. And we felt like gave value to the people that we created the company to bring value to, whether that was our customers, and some of the decisions that we've made and how we formulate our products, because how we formulate our products, as an example, is more expensive because of the ingredients that we choose to use, because of the fact that those ingredients are in alignment with our value set of only producing with good for you ingredients. That is going to cost more, which means you're going to sacrifice some of the profit short term. You're going to sacrifice some of that profit short term because you're making those decisions to bring better value to the market. And what I believe is that when you make those decisions that are aligning with the promise of why you started this company, because at the end of the day, a company is built on a promise it's making to the people that engages with it, to the consumers that buy a product from it, to the people that come alongside as an employee, or in our case, and also as brand partners to represent our brand. We're delivering a promise. And so if we make decisions that are in alignment with that, long term, we're going to be a bigger, better, more profitable company in the long term, because we are delivering on that core value promise, even though short term, some of those decisions aren't just maximizing profit at every single turn. And when you see companies maximizing profit at every single turn and doing that at the expense of their bigger purpose, right? That's where some bad things happen. And that's where people have bad experiences. And, I think everyone can think of situations where that's happened. And so I don't think that profit and purpose are at odds if you have the right guiding force in how you're making those decisions. And if you as a company are always focused on providing the most value that you can to the market, not just extracting what you want from the market, long term, you're going to be successful and people are going to trust your brand.
I love that idea that you don't have to sacrifice purpose for profits. I think that's a super valuable idea to take away from that. And I know, Deb, you've been through a lot of different situations throughout business, ethical, unethical situations. What you've seen some things firsthand, and we all have, but from your perspective, what do you believe is the greatest benefit of operating ethically in business?
Good sleep. The reality is, you spend a lot of time and effort to build trust. We talk about this a lot when we talk about, my other passion, which is, human happiness and personal well-being. But we spend a lot of time and effort building trust. As Amber was talking about, building trust in our product, building trust in our business operating belief that our vendors believe we're going to pay them, that our salespeople believe they're going to earn the commissions that are promised, that our employees are going to receive the benefits that that we promise them when we engage them as employees. Trust is huge. And the reality about trust and operating a business, or really operating anything in your life, is it takes a long time to build. It takes a lot of effort to build. And it takes one instance of being unethical to have all of that crash down on your head. I mean, we've seen it in famous figures that we hold up, people we hold up, and then they do one thing and your view of them is forever changed. If you operate ethically, if you operate with intention to do things the right way, we're not always going to get it right. We're not always going to get it perfect. But if you've built that trust and you're making decisions under the guidelines that you've set for yourself and the ethics that your company and you have, promised to the people that you interact with and the other organizations you interact with, then a lot can be forgiven. You're still going to make mistakes, but those mistakes are not going to be catastrophic to your company. If you're hiding behind something, or if you're worried about something coming out, or you're worried about being discovered, that shows, and the veneer begins to crack, and eventually the trust is gone, and it's very difficult to build a business. It's very difficult to to grow or to really enjoy what you're doing. And I think even though this is work, and but you want to enjoy it. You want to get joy out of what you're doing. All of that goes away the minute you abandon your ethics. We have a lot of challenges that we deal with. All four of us have dealt with a lot of challenges, but we always seem to have time to have joy in solving the problem, brainstorming the problem. Sometimes we laugh at ourselves because we just didn't see something that was right in front of our face. But we know that the people that work with us understand that we are doing our best and we are trying to make decisions based on those core values that Jeff talked about. This company, we don't talk about Neora very much on this podcast, but of course we all work there. But it was founded on 3 words: make people better. So if you use those 3 words and our core values to guide the decisions you make in the boardroom, then your ethics are going to become apparent to everyone around you. And if you don't, you're going to lose sleep because you're going to be worried about being found out. You're going to do that one thing that is forever going to damage your reputation, and you can never get back. And it's not worth it. So I'm going to go back to my original answer. You can sleep well if you operate ethically.
Actually, I love that answer, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was studying my MBA, and we were in our business ethics portion of the curriculum, which we could talk about why you have to have an ethics portion of your business school, but the professor was talking about there is this balance that you have to strike between what he called eating well and sleeping well. And his point was that you don't have to choose, which goes back to what Amber said also earlier, is like when you're making decisions for the long term and when you're making decisions from that foundation of ethics and doing the right thing. And I love what Jeff said too. Like, we always have perfect intentions. We may not execute that perfectly, but I think people recognize your intention, whether you execute it the right way, execute perfectly or not, knowing we're going to make mistakes from time to time. We're going to make the wrong choice. But I do love that answer about sleeping well, because ultimately the profits, I believe personally, that there is long-term growth and profitability that comes from operating ethically and consciously. And I think most of our listeners would agree with that. I think the challenge is in the heat of the moment and when you're in the middle of trying to make a tough decision, but also, there's this idea of, is there a right and wrong? Like, is there a higher power or something out there that's kind of that we're trying to live a higher law because we believe in a higher power, because we truly believe that there is a right and wrong. And Jeff, you mentioned that earlier, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but for me personally, I do believe that there is a higher power out there, and I am trying to live a better, more ethical life because of that. But Jeff, you mentioned that as well.
To a certain degree, this is where it gets individualized, because there's all kinds of religions and there's all kinds of beliefs, but all those, when you get down to it, they have is some fundamental document or some fundamental conversation or experience around something. Basically, these are ethics, which is how you're going to live your life. Okay, and it's different all over the place. And so, what you might think are not ethical, another person might think is ethical. I mean, there have been wars over that. Okay, and so this is not something that is definitive. Okay, And so we all, and everybody likes to think that their ethics come from a higher power than the other person's ethics. Okay. And so it's very interesting how we all kind of tie into that, but it leads you to believe is that people do understand there is something driving you. Okay. There is something that reacts to how you do things, good or bad. And so the situation here is we all have different ways we look at that. Okay. And so, yes, I do believe in a higher power personally. Okay. I do believe that there's standards by which we live our lives. Okay. But I also have to recognize what I think is ethical. Another person might see differently. And so, how do you judge them? Okay. And I've known people who are very, very, very unethical in my standards who have had success. Okay. But is that success? For me, it would not be success. Okay. Because it's usually done at the expense of others. Back to what Amber's talking about. That's one thing I really look at is decisions. Are they made at the expense of others? And I think, back to, the one thing we hear in almost any higher power religion is do unto others as you have them do unto you. Treat the other person with respect. And so, really, that's a fundamental way to really look at ethics is are you making decisions on behalf of the whole versus on behalf of yourself? Back to what Amber said. And I think that's the fundamental thing when you look at, how we quote unquote are judged, and judgment can come in your own head. You should have some kind of barometer in you that is evaluating if what decisions you're making are good or bad. That. A lot of times that's intuitive based upon how you live your life. Okay. But back to the simple, long answer to a simple question, is it attached to a higher power? Yeah. But what I didn't want to say is there's just one higher power. And we all have a different version of that, but there is a standard there is a way that you're this. I don't want to say that I guess I'm going to say that we're graded based upon your actions. Okay. And those actions are going to be tied to ethics. Although those ethics might be different from person to person or company to company.
That's where it gets harder because I think the personal interpretation of what is and what isn't ethical can differ from person to person. But I think what you're saying, and I think what we all agree on, is that there, deep down, we all believe that there is a true sense of right and wrong. And as long as you believe that, if you buy into that idea, and I think we all do, then there is a clear definition of what's ethical and what's not ethical. Let's talk about what happens when you see success. And I should clarify, when you see financial success or success in business, growing a large business, but that people aren't acting ethically. For several years, I worked out of Silicon Valley, and the mantra at the time was grow or die. And it was interesting to see that certain companies, some big companies, some well-known brands that we all interact with on a regular basis, were making decisions that I think most people would regard as unethical. But the result was in a big business, in a profitable business, and turning something into a household name. So how do you balance that? Like there's obviously unethical behavior, but it's not necessarily penalizing the company that's operating that way. So Deb, I'll ask you, because you've worked with some large organizations, publicly traded organizations. Is there justice for companies that operate unethically?
Well, I think people get confused in business sometimes about ethics and legal. I mean, there are people that operate unethically, but they're perfectly well within the law. We saw this in the banking crisis, right? We saw this in 2008 with the home mortgage stacking stuff and the stuff that really caused, our financial systems in the country to almost collapse. People were making tons of money. They were financially successful, but ultimately it was harming virtually everybody in the world, which is kind of scary to think about. But it was legal. It's not that it was illegal. So I think you have to be really clear in who you are when you work at a company. I did work at a company once where I was sitting in a boardroom, and we had a product that had a contamination test, and there was about a very small number, like 600 or 700 bottles of this that needed to be recalled. But because of the way it was manufactured, we had to recall several thousand bottles. And we actually had someone in the room go, well, what's the risk if we don't? Let's just let it go. And at that point, you make the decision, number one, can I work here? Is this the environment for me? financial success cannot trump your own personal ethics. I think people get in trouble when they start thinking about profit over people. And I also think people get in trouble when they start thinking about themselves as being the most important element in business. So companies, they can behave unethically, but well within the lines of the law, and be successful financially. The question is that the company you want to be part of? Because you really can't stop it, right? You really can't say, okay, personally, I don't want to buy something from XYZ company, and that's going to make a massive difference to them. But if enough people say it, we've all seen this. How many companies have we seen that have just taken huge financial hits because something they've done, manufacturing shoes with child labor or something along the lines, comes back and bites them because they put profit over people. And, you know, it's frustrating to know that financial success finds those people or finds those companies, but I don't know that on a global level, there's anything that is going to come back and bite them. But for me, the question is, do I want to be a part of that? Do I want to support that? Do I want to be a piece of that? Is that how I want to grow? Is that how we want to grow? Do we want a company where we feel good about waking up every morning, going to work and helping people, making people better? Or do we want to work for a company that is purely about how much money did we put in our pockets? And when this one blows up, we'll go build another one. We had a conversation yesterday, just yesterday, Dave, Amber, we all had a conversation about how some companies, you know, they don't care if the company goes bankrupt because they made money. That, you know, and that's true. So ethics in business, they're not always there. I think searching for a company that has the ethics that you have, that demonstrates them and works with them, that's where you want to work. That's who you want to be affiliated with. And just know that not everyone, karma isn't always going to come back and get everybody, at least not in this life.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if it did? Wouldn't it be great if it was immediate? Like you make an unethical decision and like immediately
Struck by lightning.
recognized. Yeah.
Or you get caught doing something that is everybody views unethical, but isn't necessarily legal, and your company, everybody quits buying from you all at once. Wouldn't that be great? We're just never going to buy from that brand again, and nobody is. Oh, but now it's 80% cheaper than the other brand. Now I'm going to buy that because it's better for me. It's very hard to make those decisions in your life, but we all have to make our own decisions.
True. Yeah, absolutely agree with all of that. Amber, I think the people who know you, they know you operate with exceptional integrity. I think every decision you make is made with the greater good in mind. But, you know, what do you do about it when, you know, other businesses, competitors are operating unethically? Like, how do you handle that? Like, how do you keep the position of the good guy in the face of competitors who are operating unethically? And you know they're unethical.
That's a great question, because I really think it can be frustrating, right? Because you feel like in some moments you're doing the right thing, and others aren't, and they're experiencing maybe some kind of result that you're also wanting to experience, but you're not getting that in the moment. And what I've found, though, and it's a quote out of The Slight Edge that is also, you know, a proven truth in life, the longer you live, is that time will either promote or expose you. And so, you know, seeing 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we're getting close to 15 years down the road, a lot of those companies ended up imploding because, again, over time, if you're just trying to extract things from people, extract money from people, extract value out of the market, and you're not giving to people, you're not giving value, you're not giving, true rewards, whatever that might look like. It's different for each business, but over time, you know, people catch on, and people aren't going to continue buying or doing business with companies that aren't reciprocating, you know, that value. And I think consumers are becoming smarter and smarter and asking more questions, as they should, from brands of, you know, the transparency behind their ingredients, their sustainability, their business practices, their, you know, those kinds of things matter more to consumers, as they should. And I think it's great if you put your consumer hat your consumer hat on, is that I very much only try to buy from brands where I believe in their value and their mission, and I believe in the way that they bring things of value to the market. And so we all get a choice, and who we choose to align with, who we choose to work for, who we choose to shop from, who we choose to, share recommendations of, all of that. If we're clear on what your kind of your value set is, you're helping advance that in your own small way. But each of us, right, it's a ripple effect. If each of us does our own part, the magnitude of us all doing it does truly add up and make change. And you see this right now in the food industry, where they're having to make change because the buying dollar moved to where people want cleaner options. So therefore it forces companies to move there. So we all get to make choices every day that align with our value set. And I think there's power in being conscious of what yours are and using your voting power in how you shop, who you work with, what you promote.
One of the things I really like that Amber touched on is how our younger consumers are really, really more in touch with what that brand represents and who they are and what ethics they're promoting. And it is far, for Generation X, which I am, we really didn't think about that as much as we thought about value. But really, the younger set, my children, their friends, people in their 20s, people in their 30s, really do care about the company. We'll go somewhere and my kids will say, don't buy that. And I'm like, why? And they'll have some story about why they don't want to support that brand. And it's getting harder and harder to hide when you're doing the wrong thing. And the follow on to that is, sometimes it's hard in business when people say, well, why can they do that and we can't? And the answer is, we can't do it because it's the wrong thing to do. So let's do what we can do. And that's not always easy in the moment to promote, but we have to do that in order to maintain our ethics. And that becomes more and more challenging. But I do believe that ultimately most of those companies, particularly given the way the world is going, will be exposed. Particularly in our space. I mean, it's much harder in our space where you have basically masses of people who voluntarily engage with your brand to help you build your business. It's much harder to attract people, and it's if you're doing the wrong thing, and that gets exposed much faster. Definitely, that promoter exposed, they get exposed. And so there's a difficulty in identifying it up front, but it doesn't take very long to figure out, hey, that is not a brand that I want to be part of.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think now more than ever, just because of social media and because of how connected everybody is, like if you do mess up and you make an unethical choice in business, it's really tough to keep that under wraps. Like I think people know about it, they publicize it, and like you said, it either promotes or exposes you. That's happening much more rapidly now in 2024 than it ever has, which I think is a good thing. I think that's good for the market.
I think people got to be careful though, because that cuts both ways, because social media and the internet has given way too many people a voice who haven't earned the voice yet. And so it doesn't necessarily mean they are putting out what is ethical. So it's up to people to this, to do their research and their studying, because it's not going to change. The internet's not going to change ethics. The conflict between good and bad is not going away. If anything, it's going to accentuate it. Okay. So it also, on one hand, it allows you the opportunity to get information. It allows you to make better decisions. On the other hand, it allows people to give you information that's not good information. So I think people just need to, buyer beware when you go down that path. The other thing is this is why it all starts with you, because, in our industry, I know every single, you call it trick, maneuver, decision you can make to make a company more profitable, make it explode faster, make it benefit me versus them. I know every single one of them and have chosen not to use them. Okay. I always had a saying, it's not just the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. Because like we keep on saying, over time, eventually you'll get the results. Okay. You can choose to go down that path. I know every single one of them. I mean, I could literally sit down, design the company that would explode in our industry, but it's not the ethical thing to do. Okay. And so that's when you kind of find out who you are, is when you know what's good and bad, and the bad might get you what you think you want faster, but the good is going to get you what you want, not at the expense of others, and do it the right way. And that's really kind of the definition of ethics right there. Are you willing to make decisions on behalf of what's right, on what's good for the whole, or are you making decisions based on yourself? And so, I'm known in our industry as pretty much the guy against the bad people. pretty loud voice in that area. Okay. And I don't apologize for it, because somebody needs to, because I really believe in our industry. I believe in what we do, but I believe, like any industry, there's people who don't operate ethically. And I think that's an important thing for an industry as a whole. And I'm proud to be a part of that. I'm proud that Neora is a part of that. But again, it is the biggest definition. We've gone through a lot of stuff. We've had some challenges, like every company has, that survives. And I don't think if we hadn't had our ethical base, which started with how we built the company originally, that we would have been able to withstand those challenges. And I know a lot of companies around us who are not withstanding those challenges. Big companies who did not have an ethical foundation. And it starts at the ownership. It starts with the management, okay? And birds of a feather flock together. They attract people like themselves. And all of a sudden, you got a CEO, you got an owners and a CFO and a sales marketing manager who basically are operating from the same ethics, same principles, same values, making decisions not good for the whole, but good for them. And eventually it implodes on them, okay? They walk away feeling like they won, but was it ethical, okay? The masses walk away knowing they lost, knowing it wasn't ethical. And I think, like you said, there is a karma effect to that. So I think it's just a way you live your life is something that's very, is very, very important to you. And it's something that you want to do I know I look at you guys here on the screen, and I know the incredible ethics that you all have. I mean, you guys make me more ethical. You make me have higher principles, more values. And I think it's important you surround yourself with, because without that, you become the combined average of the people you associate with the most. And you get around the wrong people who make the wrong decisions, you will go down an unethical path. And we haven't done that.
That's a really important point to make in this discussion, is that, the more you surround yourself with people who are willing to make, let's call them adjustments to their ethics based on the decision, based on the moment, that becomes easier and easier to do. Whereas if you are surrounding yourself with people that you can trust and people that are going to make the right ethical decision, then it becomes easier and easier to make that decision over and over. Jeff, because you've had a remarkable, successful journey in your career, multiple businesses. You've had people, partners, do some unethical things, and I know you talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to explore further on, like, how do you keep that from affecting you? Like, how do you keep that from messing with your own mindset about what's right and wrong and how you feel about it?
Well, it will mess with you, okay? And you'll have your moments where you say, "Why me?" and "Is this right? Is this fair?" But at the end of the day, you at least you have strength in knowing who you are. And quite honestly, I mean, I'm not going to go into names here. I'm not going to talk about people or companies, but I could line them up, and every single one of them gone off to not have success. Okay, as we continue on having success, and so I think everybody's path to success will be littered with people who do things to them that are not ethical. Okay, and those are the people who feel righteous most of the time. And so you have to just, it's back to, do you have a strong principles and values and ethics that you're going to stand on, that you believe in, and yeah, you have to fight them. Okay, you have to take them on, but you don't have to become them, I guess, more than anything else. And so one thing you have to understand, this is something that comes with the territory. There's a saying I have: quit wanting what you don't want. I don't want anybody to be around me, do anything bad, and I don't want anybody to turn on me. Well, then you're not in business, and you're not going to have success. It's part of the passage, the right away, the passage to success. Okay, and so I just see it as part of the process. I see it as a learning curve, and it also becomes a validation, because, like I said earlier, every one of them. And this is not just this industry. Along the way, you have people that you look to who turned and became what they weren't, and they went another way. And you always, when that originally happens, you question yourself. You question, well, okay, am I seeing things right? Or am I doing things right? But eventually, over time, you realize, I'm staying down this path. I am making ethical decisions that are good for the whole. I'm doing the right thing. And then I look to them and I see them every single time go down a path where they don't have success. And you start getting reaffirmation that, making the good decisions, the hard decisions, back to what Amber said, the decisions that don't give you immediate return, but give you the long-term return. I think her bringing up our product was a great example, because that is a commitment to do something that's ethical. Okay. We do that same thing with our business model. We do that same thing in our business principles in the company. And so what you have to do is believe in who you are. I've got saying, got to know who you are, know where you're going, know how you're going to get there. And along the way, you're going to have those people who are going to choose another path, although they were on the path with you for a period of time. And you can't let them rearrange the way you see the future, rearrange you see how you're going to do things, and allow you to walk away from who you are as a person. So again, it begins and it ends with you knowing who you are, your values, your integrity, your purpose, your character, your meaning, which are all the foundational things that create the ethics of who you are.
I think that's an important point for people, especially people who maybe are starting your journey into business, or starting your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. Like, it is going to happen, and you have to be ready for that. And I think that was a great way to couch that in how you respond to that, because it's part, unfortunately, it's part of doing business. I want to go back to something that Deb mentioned earlier, which is the difference between legal and ethical. I think that there are a lot of people that assume that if something is legal, that it is ethical, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case. And how do you know the difference? Like, how do you know, Amber, how toss that over to you. Like, how do you know the difference between legal versus ethical?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a distinction. I think in most cases, like, just doing things that are legal is kind of a low bar. If you're looking at it from an ethical standpoint, that's like, what's not going to send you to jail is not how are you going to contribute to society. And I think if you think about it from the mindset of what is the impact you're trying to make in this world, like, every company should be trying to make some kind of positive impact. It's different for, every entrepreneur starts something because they're trying to make a positive impact. They're trying to create something in the world, which creation is like the heart of every entrepreneur, right? You're starting it because you're trying to create, you're trying to introduce a solution that the world needs. You're trying to, spread an idea, spread a concept, spread a product, whatever that might look like. And so ethics go, far beyond law, because they're looking at what is the actual intent and impact that you're making on society. And is that an impact that makes society and the individuals that interact with you better? Or is it one that just takes their money, gets what you want out of them? And so that symbiotic relationship between who you're serving, are they actually getting the results that you're promising that they're going to get, should be, taken into consideration. I think I see sometimes where it's like, well, entrepreneurs, and I had this debate online actually with someone who was selling something like a course set that it was not set up ethically, in my opinion, because people could go view it for free on YouTube. So it's like, in that scenario, is it legal to sell something to somebody where they could go view that same exact content on YouTube for free? Yeah, it's legal. Is it ethical? In my opinion, no, because you didn't provide any value. You got money from them. You preyed on maybe an insecurity or fear they had to get money from them, and they didn't get value because they could have gotten the same thing for free, like by searching that for that video name on YouTube. So that's just like an example that comes to mind. And it's really the value that you're producing in what you're providing to your consumers.
It goes back to what you said earlier about, people and principle over profit. And I think that's a great litmus test. And that's a great example that you shared, is just that, because that follows along the same reasoning. Shifting a little bit, because I know this comes up in business too, especially if you're building international business. Deb, you've done a lot of international business over the years, worked with a lot of different countries. is there a cultural difference when it comes to ethics or not?
Absolutely, there's a difference. But how you handle that difference is your ethics, right? In some cultures, and I know, Dave, you've experienced this, it's okay to have money be, to feel like you won in the monetary transaction. That's kind of your goal. But it's also understood in that culture, across the culture, right? It's not necessarily they don't look at you negatively because you made a profit, or they don't look at you negatively because you're successful. But there is a bit of a nuance. But there's no ethical difference in honesty. There's no ethical difference in being straightforward. There's no ethical difference in, delivering a quality product. There's not a culture where it's acceptable to deceive people. There's not a culture where it's acceptable to not live up to the promise. Yes, there are cultural differences, but it's really more cultural differences in the negotiation than it is in the promise, if that makes sense. That's my experience anyway. The negotiation may be different, but ultimately someone is trading money for goods, and the quality of the goods needs to be what's expected, and it needs to be at what both parties consider a fair price, because it's still ultimately, I think in most cultures, win-win is what's successful, and that's when you know you've been ethical. If everybody feels like they got what they wanted out of the deal. I don't know if that's been your experience. That's been mine.
I would agree. I think that there is a difference in cultures, but I think there are way more similarities than there are differences. I guess I would put it that way.
Well, it's a style difference, right? It's more of a style and an approach difference. Some cultures are more direct. Some cultures are less direct. Japan, for example, they say yes, which means I understand, not yes, I want the deal is done, right? It's a cultural difference, but you have to know those nuances. But the ethics are the same. I mean, there is no place in the world where it's okay to swindle people, lie to people, make promises that you don't fulfill, and not be ethical. There's nuances in how you approach the negotiation, but the negotiation is ultimately, measured by how people feel at the end of it. Do they feel okay? Do they feel like they got what they paid for? Do they feel like they were treated appropriately? Do they feel like they were treated fairly? Do they feel like you were honest with them? These are the important things across every culture.
What are some takeaways that we can share with people as some advice and some takeaways? Like, how do you check yourself on a regular basis? We'll just go around, like parting advice. Last, any like closing thoughts on this topic? But Amber, maybe start with you, and we'll just go around.
Yeah, I think it starts with getting really clear about what are your value sets and what you will or won't do, because you can get into situations that are tricky, and you can be surrounded by the wrong people, and that's where you can fall into trouble. But if you're super clear from the get-go of what you want to stand for and what is the impact that you want to make in this world with what you're doing, having that as your North Star is one of the best things that you can do. And just stay always centered on that, because it might not be, there's many times where we made decisions that weren't the easiest or most financially, benefiting decision in that moment, but it very clearly aligned with those value sets that we had stated. And that's, never led us wrong. That's always allowed us to feel, really secure and confident in our decision, and create where there's not, conflict internally within the organization around those decisions, because it's very clear that they're in alignment with that value set that we set forth. So having that is kind of, and having it written down and having it publicly available and having it be not just something that's written on a piece of paper, but is the core fabric of everything you do, is going to make their journey much more clear.
Yeah. Deb, what are your thoughts? How do you stay on top of this as a business leader?
Well, I want to share wisdom of my mother, which is, you're ethical when you do the same thing when people are watching that you do when people aren't watching. So your North Star is not for public view. You're not doing it because people are watching you. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And you have an internal, the vast majority of the world has an internal compass and knows if they're doing right or wrong. So be able to sleep at night. When you're running an organization, you can't share everything. There are things that you can't share, and it's better not to share. Sometimes people don't need to know everything for their own peace of mind. They don't always need to know. But when you do share things and you are transparent and be transparent where you can, let people know what's going on. And if you've set the right culture up and people know that you're trying to do the right thing, and people know that as an organization, you're trying to contribute in a positive way in the world, they'll help you stay on track. They'll help you be ethical, and they'll call you out when you're not. And more importantly, they'll call each other out when they're not. If you have values and you don't live to them, what's the point of having values? So having those core values, making it clear to everybody that not only are they just a piece of paper on the wall, but they're how you make your decisions, they're how you live, they're how you operate. Be transparent enough that you don't have to tell people, they can see it. That's how you lead an organization ethically. And it's, when we talk about being transparent, it doesn't mean you open up the books and you show everybody from the janitor to the, the vendor down the hall visiting your books. It means that you're transparent about where you are, where you're going, and you're not using information to deceive people, using information, giving them the information they need to help them be successful, and they'll help you build your success.
I love that. Jeff, how about you? Any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, we began with I think we've done a good job of going all over this, but we began with the core values, and really, every great company has a great culture. The culture is kind of the DNA of the company, and it basically attracts who you are and it repels who you're not. And that's really what ethics does. It attracts who you are and it repels who you're not. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's ethical. Just because you can do something doesn't mean it's ethical. Okay, so just, there's thousands of decisions we made where we could have done something else because we could, but it wasn't ethical. Okay, and so when you have core values that guide your decisions, that creates your culture, which again attracts who you are and repels who you're not. It's your DNA, and it's very, very important because that's all a company is a group of people coming together around a common goal. And what you want is to have a common ethics. Okay, and you're going to have a lot of decisions that you can make. Doesn't mean they're the right decision. You can make them, but are they the ethical decision? I think the people who build a foundation on ethical decisions builds a culture that can last and withstand the test of time. And I think so. That's what we've done.
This has been a great discussion. We did cover a lot of ground. I think we could spend a lot more time talking about the nuances and the ins and outs of operating an ethical business. But I think this is a great place to start. And we will see you next time on Built to Win.
That was Jeff Olson, Amber Olson Rourke, Deborah Heisz, and Dave Fleming talking about how ethics affect your long-term business strategy. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you learned something from it, please share it with a friend or colleague who you think would also benefit. And if you're new to Built to Win, we invite you to go back and listen to our story from the beginning. You can find us wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, please rate us and leave a review to let us know what you think of the show.